I shall get our recording live. Oh, Ollie, just give me one more moment, Ollie. Thanks.
Okay, sure. I'll get it loaded up.
Okay, excellent. Ready to go. So yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our second virtual Brew Asia virtual technical session. And we've got people joining us from all over Asia. We've got Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, big contingent, as I said earlier, from Singapore and the Philippines, which is great to see. I think we've got at the moment, we've got about 50 people joining us, expecting a few more to come on in. So yeah, we're looking forward to a great presentation from Ollie and also a good chat as well afterwards, a good panel session afterwards. So for those who don't know me, my name's Charles. I'm the organizer of the Southeast Asia Brewers Conference, or otherwise known as CBrew. And we also run the Brew Asia technical sessions. So for reasons which are fairly obvious, we've had to go virtual for the moment. And we're hoping to bring that back to real technical sessions once this virus is past us. We're running these webinars to do what we can to help the industry during these difficult times. Some industries or some businesses may feel isolated, particularly with many countries in lockdown. And we wanted to do this to remind people there is a strong community out there, and it's a friendly community as well. And we feel that the collective brain pool is always strong. So what we want to do is encourage the sharing of ideas to help businesses not only survive this crisis, but to emerge stronger from it as well. And as we said last week, that this is our second technical session. Last week, we were discussing how it's much easier for small businesses to adapt to these kind of conditions. They can change very quickly. So hopefully from these sessions, you'll be getting ideas of how you can change your business, how you can change your business structure to be stronger during this period, and also how to develop your business for the future. We are putting together a series of technical sessions, webinars. We're going to do one a week, and some will be marketing, some will be more technical. And next week on Tuesday, we'll have John Palmer joining us from the US, and he'll be presenting on water, reverse osmosis, and taking all your questions as well. So that'll be next Tuesday. It'll be a morning webinar because it'll be evening in the US that time. So before we get started, quick housekeeping. In a moment, I'll ask Oliver to present on using branding and positioning to win in times of uncertainty. That will last about 20 to 25 minutes, after which we'll move into a panel discussion, which will feature Oliver, John Wei from Brewlander in Singapore, and also Joseph Barratt from Trouble Brewing, and also Mutant Communications, and he's based in Singapore as well. So there will be a fairly Singapore twist to this, Singapore-centric twist to this session, but I think a lot of the lessons are relevant to the whole region. So what we will also do, we'll invite some of the audience members to join the panel in its progress. So if you'd like to join the panel, just pop us a quick note and we'll see if we can get you up there if you have any questions you'd like to ask. For those who are new to webinars, you'll notice you can't speak during them. If you have any questions, at the bottom of your screen, Ollie's laughing there, I see. He's quite happy not to be spoken over, I think.
Amen.
Yeah. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A icon. If you have any questions, just type your questions into the Q&A icon, and then we can bring them up during the panel session after Ollie's presentation. You can also chat. There's a chat icon as well, so you can send out messages during the webinar. After this webinar finishes, because we can't have general conversations in a webinar, we're going to be opening a separate meeting room, which I'll share the link to you later. And then everybody's free to come in and join, have a beer, sit down, have a chat, and we can continue the discussion or just talk about whatever you like in the meeting room. And that will be open to anybody who wants to come in, and everybody will be taught. So without further ado, let's get rolling on this today's webinar, which is using branding and positioning to win in times of uncertainty. So Oliver, who will be presenting, is the Director of Digital and Social Strategy at marketing agency Red Square, as well as a founder of Beer Asia, a consumer-focused information portal about the region's craft beer industry. He has 12 years under his belt in marketing and strategizing, and he's worked for companies such as Samsung, Petronas, also 1MD as MDB as well. And he did his bachelor's degree researching government responses, New Zealand government responses during economic crises. So he's also recently launched his own beer label called Kaki Lang Brewing Company. So he's well aware of the problems currently facing the craft brewing industry. So today he's going to be exploring how small businesses have the advantage of flexibility and are uniquely positioned to rapidly reorganize their operations and marketing strategies during this crisis. He'll be suggesting some quick win tactics as well as strategies you can put in place for the long term and discuss case studies from around the world. So Oliver, over to you.
Thanks, Charles. Let me just turn on my presentation. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining in. You just give me a moment just to get my presentation up. All right, cool. It's great to be here. Yeah, thanks for the lovely introduction, Charles. It's a lovely, lovely warm day here in Saigon in Vietnam. I've got a background of a beach in the Philippines, which I'll explain a little later on. That's one of the ideas and tactics I want to give you so that you can steal and use it for your own business. But yeah, look, it's great to be here, everybody. And is everyone able to see my screen? Okay, great. That's always important when you're doing a webinar, just making sure that things are going to function. So look, I think as Charles touched on today, in the next kind of 10, 15 minutes or so, what I want to talk about is my perspective on how to brand and do marketing and do positioning and position your business, not only so that you can survive the next few days, weeks, and months, but I think how so you can enter the period of recovery that's going to follow this crisis that we're currently in, and how your brand can enter it in a way that's strong, in a way that, getting yourself really, really fully prepared. So I think one of the dangers right now is, one of the big plagues that's always faced marketing in the past few years has been short-termism. And one of the worries that I see, and I'll be talking a bit about today, is just not just focusing on your short-term response to COVID, but actually using this as an opportunity to reposition your business and do some things that are quite simple and straightforward that'll really put you ahead during the recovery period. So as Charles said, my name's Oliver. I have the dubious honor of being a New Zealander. My passport photo makes me look like I'm a criminal. I wanted just to flash it up there as a moment of pride for any other fellow Kiwis who are part of this conversation. And as Charles said, I set up Beer Asia, which is really just a fun passion project originally, which has become something, something I guess a little bit more bigger than I actually expected. So, chuck us a Facebook like. I feel like one of those YouTube influencers right now, telling people to go and like us in the comments. But yeah, join our community. We'd love to have you as part of us. But I'm not here to talk about Beer Asia today. Today I'm here to give you guys some ideas, some tactics, just like what we said on the description, what we said on the label. I want to give you some thinking and some thoughts. Hopefully, maybe of all the things I talk about in the next 10 minutes, my intention would be that you can steal at least one of these ideas and you can steal it for your business or modify it in some way. Or at the very least, I want to get you thinking about things that you could be doing right now that maybe you aren't doing. Now, marketing in a lockdown is very, very challenging. I don't have to keep on repeating how serious the times are we're in right now. I know everyone throughout the region is facing various stages of lockdown. I know Philippines is one of the more serious cases, Thailand, but I think generally everyone's facing the same shitstorm. And the question is, how do we get out of it? And what are the ways and what are the tactics that you can immediately deploy that seem to be working right now? And these are tactics that I've been observing. I've tried applying them. Some of my clients have been looking at it and looking at how other people have been using them. And there are three key things that I think smart businesses are doing right now, small businesses and big businesses alike, that you can take and steal, or that you can adapt these ideas and deploy them immediately. And I think the three key things that I think the smart brand responses have been so far have been around what I call live programming, which I'll talk about in a second. Unusual communities, which I think is another big opportunity, is doing community building when everyone's stuck at home. And then giving people tools to survive lockdown, giving people reasons and giving people either entertainment or functional tools that can keep them engaged and entertained, particularly when they're stuck at home for a long period of time. So starting on live programming, one of the things that I'm sure that everyone's seen is this huge bloom of webinars like the one that we're on, Facebook Lives, live sessions, Instagram Lives. Now, it's all well and good to jump up on Facebook, to record yourself during a live session, to do interviews with your staff members. But what's interesting is the businesses that seem to be getting the largest audiences and building the largest fan bases that are checking in and checking into their live programs, into their live events, are doing it consistently. And what really most brands are doing that are doing this well is essentially acting like a TV channel or acting like some kind of broadcast channel or a radio station, where rather than just randomly going live and randomly popping up and down and disappearing, what they're doing is they're programming a whole series of events. So Friends of Froth, which is a craft beer community in India, on Saturdays and Sundays now does a whole range of events, right? From cooking classes online to live music. Pasteur Street Brewing Company and Heart of Darkness, which I'll talk about in a moment, have been doing a series of live webinars, virtual tap rooms, and music sessions as well. But ultimately, what the value of doing a live programming, building a live programming schedule is you're giving your audience, your fans, a way to pre-plan their days in advance. Right now, everyone's days are flowing into one another. I don't know about you, but it feels like I hardly even know what day it is today. It doesn't even really feel like Thursday, even if it is Thursday. I can hardly remember. Every day feels the same. And by giving people live programming and giving people events at certain times and dates throughout the week and doing it over and over and over again, what you're actually doing is building a live audience and really, really maximizing the potential of your social media or whatever channels that you're broadcasting this on. And one of the brands that's been doing this really effectively is Pasteur Street Brewing Company out of Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Every night at 7:30, there's a virtual tap room. And the CEO, key staff members are there every single night. You can join it tonight. It'll be there tonight. It'll be there tomorrow. And what's nice about this is there's now a community building around this channel and building around this platform where it isn't just about doing a one-off and having everyone laugh and giggle and being in a Zoom webinar. What's actually quite cool is it's actually building a sense of community, even with hardcore fans of Pasteur Street who've never really known the CEO. And what it's actually doing is not only just creating a sense of fun and community and giving people a place to go and have a beer and relax, even though they're stuck at home and feel like they're somewhere else, but it's also letting the brand connect with people. And it's actually giving the brand live feedback because you're talking to the CEO, you're talking to the sales director, Misha, and it's actually a really interesting experience watching that kind of that great leveling where there isn't any intermediation between the senior people of the brewery and their drinkers. So I think that's an opportunity as well to think about these kind of live sessions, not just you broadcasting out, but actually look at it as a two-way session to get feedback on your business as well. And this is just an example of a video from one of the recent drinks sessions, which I was in. As you can see, the tap room is a chaotic, strange environment. Everyone's just drinking beer. That's what a tap room is. So they've essentially tried to really replicate the tap room experience online. And obviously, as you guys can see, Zoom, Pasteur Street uses Zoom. We're using Zoom now. Zoom isn't actually the only platform you could use. You can actually use Google Hangouts as well. So if you guys don't want to sign up for a Zoom account, if you're worried about all the privacy worries about how all of our Zoom data is being routed through the People's Republic of China, you're welcome to use Google. There's a bunch of other platforms as well you can use. But ultimately, I'd really encourage all of you, whether you're a bar, whether you're a brewery, to set up some kind of event like this where you can check in with your customers and do it weekly. So it builds up a habit and builds up a ritual in the eyes of your customers. Heart of Darkness is taking a slightly more longer form approach where they're doing weekly events. John, who's actually on the panel with me tonight, is actually going to be joining the Heart of Darkness Unfiltered session on Friday. And what's cool about Heart of Darkness is rather than creating a taproom experience, which is one tactic you can use, their tactic is more almost like a curated radio show or a TV show that you check in. They've got a host, their brewer Dwayne checks in as well. And I think that's quite a nice alternative as well. If you're not comfortable doing it every night, at least check in with your customers, give your fans a chance to connect with you once a week. It's free. This is one of the things that every single person on this call could be doing. Even if you're in a lockdown, even if you're in the Philippines where you can't even deliver alcohol, you're in a situation where you can't reach your customers. This is the easiest way to reach your customers, and it's the easiest way ultimately to not have to spend any money because you can just put it up on your Facebook, on your YouTube, and just broadcast it. Another tactic that some people are starting to use as well is connecting with music. So what you can see here is Heart of Darkness has actually launched a Spotify playlist. So again, they've tried to create that tap room music experience, because lots of the tap rooms we all go to around the region got great music and music that we like. And so you can actually listen to them, you can scan this QR code and you can actually listen to the music on Spotify, which is quite cool. It's, again, really creating that tap room experience, but thinking about the fact that everybody's stuck at home. I don't have to show you guys all the stats I showed you in the last webinar. We all know everyone's stuck at home. Another tactic that I think that we can do is build some unusual communities. Now, community building is something that a lot of bars, breweries don't do in the best of times. This is your chance to invest in building an online community right now. And this is probably the one time where if you do something slightly unusual and weird, or something slightly creative and unique in terms of building a community, you can get people's attention and really stand out. Now, I'm sure many of you will know Behemoth. I'm a New Zealander, so I'm inherently biased. I'm just going to flood you with lots and lots of New Zealand marketing examples, and no one else can say anything because that's the glorious part about Zoom. Behemoth has launched a really, really fantastic activity called Couch Beers with Behemoth. Now, basically, it's a Facebook group, which is a totally underutilized marketing tool. I could go on for an hour about Facebook groups. Every single one of you right now should go and set up a Facebook group for your bar, for your beer business, for your brewery. If you haven't already got one, please set it up. Invite some people in. I guarantee you it'll be really, really useful. Andrew Childs from Behemoth, what you can see there on the screen, he has basically created this Facebook group called Saving the World with Couch Beers. And the pitch of the group is, you're saving the world by staying at home. Rather than, he's not just saying stay home, he's actually giving you a fun activity to do at home, which is to drink beer on your couch. And he's created this huge community with thousands and thousands of people in it, where everyone logs on every day, they take a photo of themselves drinking a beer on their couch. And it's also created a channel for Andrew to communicate with both his current audience and a new audience as well. And what's quite cool is he started doing daily broadcasts into the group. So it's also a way that if you can create a group, it's also a way you can broadcast if you don't feel as comfortable, let's say, on a webinar or in a webinar format. You can use a group to start distributing messages as well. And it can also be a way, if you don't want to tell the world, if you don't, let's say you're not feeling super confident about filming yourself, just put it into your own private group, and at least your customers or your staff can see you doing that. And already that group started to get some engagement. Radio Hauraki, which is a very popular radio station in my hometown of Auckland, New Zealand, has covered it. And I suspect this group has still got a long way to go in the coming weeks and months as the lockdown continues. Another thing that's interesting that's outside of our industry is people are starting to create tools that allow you to build community in a way that you can scale it up quite quickly. And I don't know if any of you have seen this, but there's a tool called Netflix Party. And what Netflix Party allows you to do is you can basically link up with friends and do long distance movie nights. So you can actually do parties watching TV together. Facebook actually has this function as well. It's called Watch Party. It's free. Even if you don't have Netflix, you could use a Watch Party. It's actually a really easy way to kind of sync up and actually watch things together. Again, all these ideas are things that you can do while someone's in lockdown. You can keep people engaged, keep your customers engaged without having to force them to walk outside of their house. Now, another example of an organization or a brand or a community, I should say, that's doing something quite cool I mentioned before is Friends of Froth. Friends of Froth is India's main craft beer community. It's the largest Facebook group in India for craft beer. And what they now do is on Saturdays and Sundays, work with a whole variety of people in the craft beer scene in India. In this case, this particular photo was taken during an interview with some chefs who are experts in cooking with craft beer and who are chefs in brew pubs in India. We also interviewed, I was part of this session, and I interviewed Pratik, who's the founder of the Ministry of Beer, I think it is, in India. And it's a really fun session. And not only is there just interviews and webinars and talking just like this, there's also, they've hosted sessions on training for the Cicerone exams. And they also have live music, which is actually quite interesting. It's a bit strange having live music in a webinar session, but it's still really creative. And I think we still haven't seen the ultimate links that, even small groups, small organizations can go to keep people really engaged online. Now, the last part of the kind of toolkit of things that I wanted to talk about around quick responses, whether we're talking about, again, building communities, running these webinars, creating these virtual tap rooms, is lockdown tools. Now, everyone's sitting around at home. What you've got to start doing is thinking about what's their state of mind. As a brand, what can you do that's meaningful, that can keep people engaged? Whether that's your immediate fans, or whether that's in the long run, thinking about how people are going to look back and think of you as a brand and think of your brand after the crisis is over, let alone even if they can remember that you even existed. If that's the key thing is staying active and keeping on doing activities. But in terms of lockdown tools, my favorite example, which I've actually got behind me right now, is Travel From Home, which is a project that It's More Fun in the Philippines, which is the official tourism brand of the Philippines. What essentially they've created is a landing page on their website where you can actually choose virtual backgrounds for different calls at different times of the day. So the genius behind this is that, everyone's got these austere, boring backgrounds. I know everyone on this call's got nice ones, but a lot of the time, even my background looks kind of lame if this was turned off, it would be a pretty boring room. So they've actually created a whole range of virtual backgrounds of beautiful tourism destinations in the Philippines. Now, as much as it's a great step to keep people engaged with the Philippines brand and to keep people, to give someone a useful tool that they can have a nice, pretty background during lockdown, the genius behind it is that it's keeping Philippines front of mind as a tourism destination once the recovery is over. And people are going to think, well, God, those backgrounds are so nice. Maybe I should actually travel there. I should actually put it on my bucket list. And I think that's really from a positioning perspective where I wanted to cut out the bullshit theory around branding and positioning as much as possible and really give you guys an example of something that can really keep you front of mind and really keep your brand alive during lockdown. And you can see here, there's the background that I'm using. I don't know where it is. Probably someone in the chat can help tell me where it is. I'm not sure, but either way, it looks absolutely beautiful. So there was a collection of immediate tactics and ideas I wanted to share. Now I want to move into a bit of that stuff I was just calling theoretical bullshit, which I'm actually about to start talking about right now. And I want to talk a bit about some of the important things that you guys need to think about, particularly if you're marketing by yourself. If not, if you're marketing, if you're working as part of a team, I'm happy to share some of my resources as well with you as well. Let's say your marketing team isn't on the call, you can drop us a message afterwards, and happy to share some of these resources. But I wanted to give you a dash of theory, just enough to give you some encouragement to keep your business and keep your brand cranking in terms of marketing. Now, before I go into that, my friend Avi in Thailand, who owns Beer Civilai, has done something really cool, and I think this is one of the ultimate lockdown tools. Now, I know a few other brands have done this, and I know some people watching on the call have done this as well, but I wanted to give some love to our friends in Thailand. Beer Civilai has actually created a home brewing kit. So you can actually order a simple kit, get it delivered to your house, and you can make beer. Now, we all know, I'm sure some of the rationalists in the room might say, oh, well, I don't know how many people are actually going to do this. Are they going to screw it up? Are they not going to do it right? That doesn't matter. I think right now, if you can give people tools and give people interesting things to buy, to get delivered to their house, people are going to remember you for sure. And again, even if they don't know even if they don't know the difference between hops and grain and barley, then it doesn't really matter. You've got to keep yourself front of mind and do these fun little things that ultimately lift people's spirits a little bit during lockdown as well. All right, so that's the kind of quick fire tactics I wanted to talk about. Now let's go into that theory around how do you build a resilient brand so you can emerge stronger from this crisis, and how you can really ultimately emerge victorious, hopefully. Number one, the key is to maintain your marketing spend, to maintain your business. Now, that sounds like an obvious statement, but I want to show you some data points and some theory behind why it's really, really important that if you cut your marketing spend now, you're ultimately putting your business in danger, not just your brand, but your business. The second part is around the importance of being creative and emotional in your marketing right now. And the third part is around stopping that social bullshit. And I'll explain a bit more around what stopping social bullshit means and why it's really, really important that you as a business owner or as a business leader need to take control of your social media and stop delegating it to other people and really start owning it and taking care of it yourself. Now, this is a data point from a chap called Peter Field, who's one of the smartest guys in the world of marketing, efficient marketing and marketing stats and marketing planning right now. What he looked at was he did some research looking at marketing during downturns. And what they found is if you cut marketing spend, you're basically cutting your market share. So the key thing is if you can at least maintain your current marketing spend right now, you will emerge relatively unscathed from this whole crisis. And there's a whole lot of data. If you're interested in diving into the background of this data, I've got a whole bunch of it. I've got a bunch of research papers, happy to share them with you after this. But ultimately, the key thing, guys, is you've got to maintain your marketing spend. If you cut it now, you're endangering your business. Yes, you may have to cut it a little bit. I understand there might be some situations where just to stay alive, you may have to cut it. But try and keep it consistent and try and keep constant activity out in the marketplace. And part of that is, and again, this is research from Peter Field as well, but from Better Times. What he's shown over and over again across thousands of case studies across hundreds of countries, not hundreds of countries, probably about 20 or 30 countries from his research, but mostly European and Asian markets, but still I think it's relevant. What he's proven is if you've got an increasing share of voice, that means the more people that are talking about you, your market share increases as well. So the idea of any marketing you should be doing right now is to get people talking about you. It shouldn't just be to get clicks, to get impressions, to get reach. Your overriding objective, irrespective of your situation, should be increasing your share of voice in your given market, getting people talking about you, doing those kind of things like virtual tap rooms, like Spotify playlists, like what Avi's doing in Thailand. If you can get your share of voice higher than your share of market, your share of market will increase. And this is a law that's been proven time and time again. I've been using this slide for a couple of years. It's very, 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 very important to get this right. You've got to keep people talking about you. And there's even more data to prove this. And this is again from Peter Field. I know these slides are boring, but it's important. This is important stuff. If you can invest more right now in increasing your share of voice, so getting more active in the marketplace, doing more interesting creative work, not only will you drive short-term growth, but you're actually going to drive ultimately longer-term growth once the recession's over. And you're actually going to be in a position where once the recession's over, if you've kept your share of voice consistent, your market share is going to increase after the recession because everybody else is cutting their budgets right now. So if you can hold the line, I promise you there's so much data proving this from recession after recession after recession, searching right back to the 1920s, like I talked about in my last webinar. You've got to try and focus on generating more share of voice and not cutting your budgets. Next, the marketing and creative you should be putting out right now should not be about rational beer delivery. Yes, you need to get your beer delivery communications right now. But what you've got to do is try and add a creative spin onto everything that you're doing. Can you make your ads funny? Can you make them sad? Can you tell people how difficult your situation is right now and add an emotional element to it? And the proof's really in the pudding that if you make an ad that's creative versus an ad that's not creative, meaning it's not creating some kind of emotional response, the ad that is creative is 11 times more effective than the uncreative ad. I've run this test with many, many clients. I've done this over and over again to prove to my clients. It's not always a factor of 11, but it's always a multiplying factor. Creative is a force multiplier. It makes you stronger. Even if the creative's unpolished, even if it makes you sad, even if it makes you cry, you've got to get some kind of emotional response from your marketing and advertising. And again, the data proves this. Looking at case study after case study, if your marketing is purely rational, purely about money, purely about discounts, it is not as effective as emotional advertising. If you can make your advertising emotional, it's effective. That's guaranteed. And not only that, but if you can make your advertising emotional and creative and do interesting things, what's been proven is it has a whole range of business effects, not just in terms of positive sales and market share and new customers and loyalty, but it actually makes people less price sensitive, meaning that you can actually raise your prices or you can actually put out more expensive products and people are willing to spend more money on them. So if that's not enough evidence to do creative, big, bold activities right now, even on a shoestring budget, I don't know what else there is to say. Now, besides creative and besides that focus on share of voice, one of the things I mentioned before was stopping social bullshit. Now, social bullshit, how I define it, is when you just chuck out Facebook posts, Instagram posts without thinking about them, without putting any depth, without trying hard, without trying to add a creative or an emotional spin onto the work that you're doing. This chart should really show you how much of a waste of time that is right now. Facebook organic reach functionally is zero. It really gets zero once you get scale. It's significantly under 1%. What that means, right, is even if you've got a community of tens of thousands of people, even if you make a great post, only a couple of hundred people are likely to see it. If you're lucky and it's a really creative piece of content, maybe tens of thousands of people are going to see it, if you're lucky, and if you've given a great creative, engaging, emotional spin. But if you're just chucking out random posts here and there without thinking about this, and this goes for all platforms, it's the same on Instagram, it's the same on YouTube, you're just chucking content into a huge stormy sea. One of the greatest misconceptions right now, and anyone on this call who's in the marketing space right now and who thinks, okay, this is kind of Captain Obvious stuff. One of the challenges I'm personally facing with some of my clients right now is they're thinking, well, everyone's at home, everyone's on their phone. It means my reach is going to increase on my page. More people are going to engage with my content. That's simply not true. What's actually happening now is people are going onto news. They're going into much higher quality sources of information. They're actually becoming probably more discerning than they used to be about where they spend their time. So the challenge is, how do you make your content on social media more engaging and more interesting? Yes, even if you haven't got a budget, what can you do to stand out? Well, I've got a nice slide for you. If you guys are struggling with your social media strategy, with what to post on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Untapped, Twitter, whatever it is, even if, you know, if you're based out of China on platforms like Weibo and Weixin, this chart shows what content is most effective on social media by features. So the research house that put this out is called WARC, W-A-R-C. I can give you guys the full paper. I probably shouldn't, but you know, I've got the full version of the paper, so I can give it to you if you're really interested. You can message me afterwards. And what WARC found was they analyzed all these different social media campaigns, and they found out that campaigns that were original, that were funny, that were based on building out your brand personality or building out your existing brand idea, that were irreverent and funny, those were the top performing social campaigns. The bottom performing social campaigns were competitions, puzzles, challenges, offers, and useful products. So whatever category you're in, and this was a cross-category analysis, right? So it's not just looking at FMCG products, beer, B2B, whatever category you're in, you want to try and create social content that's original, that's humorous, that's funny, that's irreverent. And I think some of the examples of the brands that I'd shared earlier that are creating really interesting, unique online social activations, that's the kind of stuff that really stands out and wins. And that's why I noticed it and why it stood out to me and why I started to participate in it. And I'd really encourage you guys as a business to think about how you can add a bit more originality into your social media communications right now. Every craft beer business in the world is offering delivery right now. How can you make it special? Can you personalize it? Can you tell stories about the customers who order your beer? Every single brand, every single retailer is trying to clear all their stock. Do you think you're going to stand out if you're just saying we're doing a stock clearance sale? No. You need to tell a story about your business. Maybe tell your customers how challenging it is and how stressed out you are. Hopefully that's the kind of the content that can work. And ultimately, you know, marketing can't just be reduced to an engineering problem. Marketing is not just about, you know, bits and bytes. It's about emotion. It's about being creative. It's about being unique, whatever budget you're on. Now, my last couple of slides, I wanted to show you 3 examples of people, organizations, and brands around the world that are leading the fight back, that are doing cool and unique things that aren't necessarily rocket science, but that are so far achieving pretty good results. Now, Andrea Bocelli may not be your favorite classical singer. I'm not sure who is. I think Charles's favorite is Pavarotti. But he did a live broadcast from Vatican City. And I just read an article earlier that live broadcast had a new YouTube record of the most people watching a classical music live stream. I think he had 3 million people watching that live. Now, I know that might seem irrelevant to you guys, but the fact that, you know, a famous singer can go from performing before crowds of tens of thousands to performing before an audience of 3 billion just shows you the huge potential right now that you have. Even if you just do a half decent job. Now, I'm not saying any of you guys are like Andrea Bocelli in terms of singing, but even if you do a half decent job at doing a webinar, talking about your business, you can expand your audience, not just from a few people inside your tap room or your bar or your restaurant, but you can actually now address an audience of tens of thousands. I mean, right now we've got an audience of a few people listening to me, which is crazy. I'm not normally used to this. Normally my audience is my partner and my dog sitting in my room. So it's a pretty cool opportunity for everyone to stand out and do something special. Another thing, the New Zealand government, which, you know, I have a lot of criticism for sometimes, irrespective of the party that's in power, has completely switched their operations onto Zoom. Now, this should be inspiration to anyone. If a conservative, or not a conservative, but if an organization like a government can switch completely onto Zoom and broadcast their Zooms live of the parliamentary sessions, can you do the same? That could be an opportunity to broadcast maybe even some of your marketing meetings. Could you open up the marketing meetings of your brand so your fans, so they can actually join and help you brainstorm with ideas? Last but not least, Formula One and Formula E have gone completely digital. So now what's really cool is a lot of sports are actually transitioning completely from offline to online. Now, it's a really, really cool thing to see all these sport brands and all these sports jumping onto digital, because I think that this really shows the opportunity for all of us. If a brand that's totally offline, totally physical, totally reliant on physical spectators can transition from, you know, using metal and cars on the road to switching completely into digital, there's a massive opportunity for you to do the same. So on that note, we can pass over to the rest of the panel for the Q&A. Thanks everybody for listening.
Hi, Ollie. Thanks very much for that, Ollie.
Thanks, Charles.
Thanks.
All right, let's turn off the presentation.
Just want to start with a quick question to Ollie. When you're talking about doing all these activities online, so setting up tap rooms, the various activities you can do online, how sustainable is that in the long term? Because if you set up a tap room, you've got to have somebody who's going to look after it all the time. So if you're programming a regular tap room, virtual tap room, somebody has to look after it. If you are running a regular quiz night, somebody has to run that quiz night. So you have to allocate resources to that. How sustainable is that in the long term?
I think, it really depends on the organization, right? If it's just you, I mean, you can't bite off more than you can chew. I mean, Pastor Street's able to do it. Their CEO's made an effort to do it every single night. He's there. He's put a stake in the ground. Obviously, maybe in a certain situation, he might not be able to be there. But generally, he's committed that he's there or a senior member of his staff's there. Now, in larger organizations, I think it's sustainable. But I think you are right that these aren't things that you can just jump into and do one off. And I think that's where it's really, really important. You see this like TV programming, right? It's like programming a TV channel. I don't mean like programming a computer. And when you're programming a TV channel, right? Even if you haven't ever worked in TV before, if you think about it, no TV channel would ever work if you just put one random show up and then never promoted it and then took it down again. TV shows, the whole reason TV shows succeed is they're regular, right? There are seasons, there are episodes. It's episodic. And I think you've got to think about, but you are exactly right. You've got to think about, have I got the infrastructure to do this? Is my internet good enough where I am? Number two, have you got the time to put it? Number three, have you got the psychological investment required to actually be there and manage it and talk to people and engage people and be smiling at the end of a really long day after a really challenging lockdown? And I think the last part is, you've got to promote it. I mean, people aren't just going to show up just because you say, oh, we're doing a virtual tap room. I mean, you've got to email your customers, send out SMS blasts inviting them. So, I think it's a really good point, Charles. Like, the reality is you can't just do it one off. It's really critical. You've got to do it regularly and really pre-plan that time and investment out according to what you really realistically can do.
Yeah. So get it well scheduled, well planned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because we're in the same situation. We're trying to work out how do we develop these webinars. Do we keep them on a regular basis? What's going to happen once the lockdown finishes? So we're in exactly the same boat as everybody else, I think, with this. So with that, Ollie, I'm going to bring in the panelists now. So we've got John Wei and also Joe Barratt, and we've got a few questions that have been sent through to us that we're going to pose to them about what Ollie's been talking about what they're doing at the moment as well to overcome the situation. I guess the first question is, Ollie mentioned live programming during his presentation. What initiatives have you taken to engage your audience and potential new customers during this period, and have they been effective? Joe, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I mean, one of the first things we did when we first sort of live programming activity we did was launch quarantine quiz. Again, like a pub quiz virtual style. It's I guess the concept in itself wasn't so much about it being super original. There were lots of them going on around the world, but I guess we put a lot of focus on. We have Tommy Boys, he's a former GM of one of the pubs in town hosting it. It's got a bit of a personality. Made sure that we did remarketing as well to anyone that had bought beers from us that we had it engaged. So it was real low cost, but it meant that everyone that had bought beers from us in the last couple of months instantly saw that we were doing it. So the first week we had 65 people tune in, and then the second week we had we didn't upgrade our Zoom, so we got capped out at 100, and then we just did one last night with about 130 teams on it competing as well. So we're seeing that growing week on week, but also after the success of the very first week, and I could immediately see how there was a opportunity there. We then bundled it into a corporate package, and now we've been actively also selling it into corporates looking to do staff engagement, all these big organizations that struggling to keep communication, morale, all those sort of things up across these, their teams as everyone works at home. So, if you're trying to sell beer to a corporate, it's kind of hard, but selling a staff engagement tool, that's much easier. So we instantly had a lot of pickup with that, and it's been running quite well. So we've had to get a couple of other quizmasters on board as well. So we've got there's actually one on right now with a team at Google. We've got Yeah, it's actually probably represents about a quarter of our revenue right now, and we just have we don't charge for the hosting. We just have a minimum spend and a minimum number of people. Yeah.
So you're recruiting quizmasters at the moment?
Yeah. I never thought I'd say that.
So, John, you've got quite a small organization, a significantly smaller organization than Joe's got. Yeah. What have you been able to do? Because obviously last week would have been firefighting, just trying to come to terms with the situation. Yeah. As a small organization, how have you been able to adapt to this?
I think for us, we are a really small and lean team. I think, including me, I think we have five of us doing probably 10 people's jobs. And I think most of and a lot of others breweries in at least craft breweries, in Southeast Asia are probably also doing that, right? I think for us, I think we were quite fortunate that a week before this started, we started really looking into this, setting up this online thing. And, because I kind of felt that it was an eventuality before this lockdown would happen. And apart from that, right, I think the team right now, after, like you said, the last week was a lot of firefighting and considering that we are mainly focused more on B2B and bars and restaurants distribution. We are right now, after getting that online thing ready, we are starting to look more into, having Zoom interviews with, just hanging out with friends, brewer friends within the region. They travel here, we travel quite a bit around as well, and just to share with craft beer lovers and drinkers what the situation is going on not just in Singapore, but how is it like going in China, where it's finally improving, and which is something probably we can look forward to as well, or what friends are doing in Taiwan, who's managing this situation a lot better than a lot of countries. Not just that also, but just forging stronger communities. I think like what Ollie mentioned, communities are very important, and craft really it's a community thing, right? And one thing we're also looking at is talking about how we got started, and coming back to that homebrew thing as well. So we are trying to engage homebrewers as well, do homebrew Q&As probably, and just coming back to how we got started and that. And I think another important point is that people now have a lot more time on their hands being stuck at home, right? And especially like for myself as well, every other 10 minutes, a friend is like forwarding you an article that's like so depressing and a record high counts today that so I think a lot of people want to read something fun.
So kind of keeping
something, yeah, exactly. So
keeping your brand out there.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of people who are spending a lot more time at home drinking craft beers that are, in the past they might just drink, there's a nice beer, right? But with time on their hands, they might be, how actually is beer made, or what actually goes into the beer. And I think that that's a lot more time on their hands to explore this whole craft beer thing. And I guess that's how we all got started, some time ago as well, right?
Yeah, so I mean, is this, Ollie, I guess it's a question for you. Is this a good opportunity for the craft industry, which is, in the greater scheme of things in the beer industry, is still we're still a very small part of the whole beer industry. Is this a good opportunity for small craft organizations to be able to reach out to non-traditional craft drinkers and bring them in, teach them a bit more about what craft is?
Yeah, I mean, like, why not, right? I mean, because I think, John made a good point that right now people are saturated with so much negative content. Like right now you're seeing, like, the data I've seen is that, news watching is up 90% globally. So it's like but I think part of that is people need some kind of positive distraction, like what Joe's doing with quizzes, right? I mean, that's something that's fun, it's different, it's engaging people online. I mean, I think that the opportunity, is even if you are a one-man operation, if you can put out something that's interesting, that trains people, that educates people, and talking about beer, I mean, it's actually a really good opportunity, really. And I think right now as well, one of the cool things about this moment is that it's great. It's a great leveling moment, I think, because I guess now anyone with their computer can be on doing a webinar, right? Look at me, I was never doing this stuff before. And I think that, I think anyone now, as long as you've got a computer and you can install this free version of Zoom, or you could do it through Facebook Live. If you want to talk about how you brew, even brewing in your kitchen, I think that's one of the things. Past Earth Street just launched a video of one of their brewers brewing up a 2-liter batch of their Jasmine IPA just in his kitchen. And it's not necessarily the most finely polished piece of content, but it's something that's interesting and engaging. And I guess anyone can do it, really. So yeah, I reckon there's actually never been a better time. I mean, I hate to say this, but if you're a very small new business, in a way, there's actually never been a better time to start to get into it. At least you can test and learn right now.
It's both exhilarating but terrifying at the same time. You don't know if you're going to come through, but you know that if you do come through, then you're going to be in a much better position.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the approach that we've been taking to the market as well. Is very much that when the bars all first closed, we were like, we've never done B2C sales before, and in fact, like 85-90% of our sales was all draft. Transitioning to we were probably doing like maybe 3,000-4,000 bottles a month, and then all of a sudden it's like 50,000 bottles in the last 3 weeks. It's just been a big shift in just everything from the logistics, workflow, packaging, not even being able to get packaging. So how do you have a little bit of fun with that? We couldn't source our labels, so we couldn't. The waiting time on the labels was too long because they got backlogged. So we ended up just buying a small commercial print and having some fun, and we just called it the lockdown edition, and driving all that sort of thing. And as we've been kind of going along, as it's been kind of picking up the orders day by day, week by week, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, it's still going to be really hard, but there is a big opportunity there on the other side. And one of the things as well, I think on the trade side, I mean, on the consumer side, 100%, I think about exposing whole new people to your brand. We're tracking about 100 orders a day at the moment, and 85% of them have never engaged with our branding before. The brand new people that are coming in to drink, to try all that stuff, which is fucking cool. But the other side of that, I think, as well, is the trade. So you've got all the big guys with the big brands. They basically, completely ignored all their trade clients now. The moment there was a shift, they're selling cases of beer for $45 a case and all that. None of us are ever going to be able to compete anywhere near that space. So there's that hearts and minds, I think, sort of opportunity to tap into some of those F&B outlets and let them know that you were there when, times were tough. Like one of the things we did, we launched on Saturday or Friday, was an Adopt a Pub. So you can choose 10% of the total value of your sale could go towards your local bar. And we just send it to them as cash, not cash, as a transfer once every couple of weeks. And again, it's not going to be a massive amount, but if it works out to being like $1 or $2 grand for each outlet, then that's cool. It helped keep someone employed. But also equally important is they also knew who was there when times were at their worst, while all the big guys with their corporate compliance and all that sort of stuff are suddenly going, COD, all that sort of thing. Or they just haven't heard from them either. So I think there's opportunities there as well, and we've both got to play on both sides of that side, I think, as well.
Yeah. So there are clear opportunities to develop your brand during these times. Yeah.
I think for Singapore as well, it's like being in a community. Of course, we know craft beer exists, right? But I would say probably 90% of consumers doesn't know that there are right now like 20-30 almost local craft breweries. So it's about shining a spotlight on there, and getting people to give it a try, right? And to know that, hey, I didn't know that Singapore has so many cool craft, locally made craft beers. And I think that's keep the conversation going, right?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of ties in. So I had a question from Jose Marie Cuervo in the Philippines, and I think the marketing ties in. So his question was, how can local craft breweries collaborate in terms of sales, marketing, and logistics in the lockdown environment? And is there a way they can work together as a group to leverage common required solutions? So I guess this ties in with getting that marketing message across that you do exist. I guess, John, you want to have a pop at this one? What you would recommend that craft breweries can do to work together?
I think that the easiest and the quickest to start would be like what we have a movement in Singapore, the Safe F&B ESG, and I think that actually took on pretty well. And to to have a movement with a hashtag that we could adopt and put into action really quick. Like to have a group of 20 local brewers to have a hashtag and say support local breweries, support SG breweries, or whatever. And I think that's a good starting point. Like we were hit with this surprise, I don't know, a week and a half ago. So everyone's still a little bit busy trying to keep afloat, but I think now it's a good time to get conversation, get everyone to the table, start talking.
Yeah, because that can also translate into the post-lockdown period if you've got the hashtag support local breweries. And can move across into the post.
Yeah, and shout out to some friends, right? Like 1925 brewery is like when this thing first started, they were really quick to ask some friends, like, hey, if you guys don't have an online platform, we're gonna start something, and we'll like be happy to market it. So it was really nice of them to offer that assistance to other friends that probably doesn't have an online platform. Another few guys like Level 33 Ryan Pines that just reached out recently about probably having a mixed pack, not just of your beers from your brands, but you could offer a mixed pack of beers from other people's brands, and just and then you reach into each other's consumers, which you probably wouldn't have before, right? Because probably Trouble would have its own customers, we would have our own customers, our own supporters. But doing something like that enables us to reach and branch out into each other's consumer base, and that really encourages synergy, right?
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I think bang on. I think everyone is stronger off together. I think there are those opportunities to partner. Chefs, we've also been partnering with like outside of just the beer side as well. We like, for instance, just today we started offering just little one-off bottles of pre-mixed cocktails. Again, it sounds pretty minor, but at the same time today, like already just today, I could see the average cart size had increased by about $20 an order as well. And that was, and so that in that process, we're making more without having to spend money, but we're also supporting all our different partners in the market as well. So all the different booze brands, like Proofing Company and those guys, Pernod Ricard as well, Jamison's and stuff. We've been running different things. That's been working really well. I think in terms of the beer side, I think there is a lot of opportunity to do that, just because specifically when you're smaller, it's so much more expensive doing logistics and fulfillment and all of that side of it, right? I think it's probably one of the biggest barriers to being able to kind of get in there and actually, offer more competitive pricing. It's pretty tough. So it makes sense to work together and work out a model where that kind of moves smoothly. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question from the floor here from Dave Byrne. So I guess John, I think you're probably best to answer this one. This is for the brewers. What changes have you made on the production side of things with regards to new products, shifts on packaging, POS materials, soap, sanitizers, dog biscuits? There you go. Well, there's old Buddy the Brew Dog in the Philippines, so I'm sure quite a few brewers have got brew dogs. So John, do you want to have a go at this first? What changes have you made to your production schedules and your brewing team?
Yeah, I think we are quite fortunate in the sense that since day one we were we are 50-50 in terms of draft and package, right? And I understand that a lot of breweries probably, packaging equipments aren't cheap to begin with. So I think a lot of them is easier to start with draft, but at some point I think it's really important to look at packaging your products and getting it into the market. And I think the worst thing that could happen, especially with something like that right now, is that if you suddenly have a big demand of orders from consumers who says, I love drinking your beers in the bars before, now that we are stuck at home, where can I go to buy your bottles? And I think that if you get caught off guard in that respect, I think that there's loss of revenue, loss of sales, but more importantly also it's a loss of a chance to connect with your consumers during this time, right? Because they're stuck at home, and guess you're going to be like a comfort peer, right? And when they look back, of that whole month they spent at home, it's like, oh, they remember very fondly of drinking or beers. At the same time, also, is as much as it's difficult for us at least, right, to continue the production. I think it's also important to plan, not just, this lockdown is going to last a month or 2 months, like what they say, but plan longer, and to ensure that stocks don't run out, or the supply chain. Don't wait until you run low on hops or malts and bottles, packaging materials, like what Joe mentioned just now. Logistics, productions, these things are affected, not just within your brewery, but also on the supplier side. So plan as far ahead as possible, and start talking to all these suppliers about how supplies, are being affected, and plan ahead. Yeah.
So don't just batten down your hatches and say we're not doing anything for a couple of months. You say, right.
Yeah, that's right. And don't just plan for how long this continues, but also plan for what if we see a sharp recovery, like for example, like China, right? From what I've spoken to friends there, it's like, things have pretty much gone back to normal in Shanghai, and when that happens, right, you want to be ready as well, So that's why we talk to our team. We're spending a lot more time on strategy planning, so we just want to plan not just for now, but what if this when the market improves and when things goes back into normal, you want to be sure that you are ready for that as well. I think that's important.
Yeah. So Ollie, I've got to bring you back in again. You've looked at last week or the 2 weeks ago, you were saying this is more like the Great Depression, the impact that it might have on economies. Yeah, what do you see, and how quickly do you see economies are going to bounce back? Do you think they'll bounce back fast, or do you think it'll be a slow recovery? Will there be certain areas that in the F&B industry that you think will bounce back quickly?
I mean, so starting from an advertising perspective, where I feel most comfortable talking about it, I would say that, we've already entered an advertising depression. So, I mean, an advertising recession, I should say. And that, the data in terms of ad spend coming out, particularly out of the US, that's probably the newest. But there's also interesting data coming out of China as well. And obviously, I'm seeing it live with my clients. I mean, everyone's cut their budgets. And I mean, when you're looking at the economic data generally in countries like, for instance, in New Zealand, where right now they're forecasting a 15% unemployment rate next month, or I think the end of this month. No one knows, right? It's actually really uncertain territory. What I think, and I mean, what I think is going to happen is, my theory is that we're going to hit this in waves. So I think, there's going to be, I'm not hoping that, obviously I'd love for there to be a sharp recovery right now, but I think the reality is, countries like China, because they're much more authoritarian, they're able to close the borders, impose shutdowns much more aggressively, versus look what's happened in Singapore. In Vietnam, I think we're about to enter I think we're going to enter a really rocky period where there's going to be kind of what the Singaporean government is calling opening and closing circuit breakers. And so in Vietnam, they're talking about opening up all the F&B next week, which I think is bonkers. I think it's crazy. That being said, I understand the business imperative as well. But look, I think we're going to go through a period where it's going to be up and down for months on end. And, from the economic side, just the amount of economic damage that's already been done, there's already been so much economic damage that if this is like the Great Depression, what we're probably going to see is in my opinion, it's going to be a gradual recovery, maybe 1 to 2 years, maybe worse in some places, longer than others. Again, that's all dependent on this idea that people keep on talking about having a vaccine. And I think, as John said, I think we're better off considering now, this is how it's going to be probably, and to greater or lesser extents. And I think what Joe was talking about was really smart. And I think a lot of the people listening should really be focusing on that. Are you managing are you switching quickly to pivoting to e-commerce right now and building up your own sales channels? Because the reality, guys, is that you're not going to be able to be delivering. Pubs aren't going to be reopening normally in the next few months. I mean, they might open temporarily and then they might shut. And so,
social distancing,
I think from brand, what was that? Sorry?
All social distancing they'll only be at half capacity for.
Yeah. And I think John's point as well is smart, that it's strategic planning isn't about what you're going to do in 2-3 years time. Strategic planning is trying to intelligently plan ahead for what's going to come next week or to come in a month's time. And I think what I'm seeing right now is a huge pivot to e-com across all my clients who don't normally like doing e-com or haven't taken it seriously. things like what Joe was talking about in terms of basket sizes, in terms of managing, working out all that kind of stuff, in terms of working out how your e-commerce is working. You're going to have to get way more of a handle on that. And yeah, look, I'm seeing a massive switch to B2C. Some of my clients were more B2B oriented, not just in F&B, but outside of F&B. A lot of people are pivoting. They're completely having to change their sales strategies and doing direct to consumer. So yeah.
Joe, have you got anything to add for
that? I think the pivot, yeah, and don't try and bite off too much at once either. Like for us, the key was, I mean, I was in a lucky position because I've got an agency as well that we could mobilize. But the key for me was always like, okay, we don't try not to overcomplicate things too quickly. Like get it going, do basic sales, and then we do step change improvements as we go along. And even if those step change improvements are almost every single day, instead of just trying to be like, okay, it's got to be perfect, it's got to have all this different things going on and all this, it's like, no, every single day we try and work on the things that, we can improve right now, and then the things that, might take a little bit longer and whatnot as well. And the key for us has just been speed. So I would say that first week we just did not, like it was 20-hour days for the first week and a half or so. And even then they haven't really stopped. But it's been about, deciding on that course of action and then making sure that we execute it really well, and then looking at what other opportunities come off the back of it. So, like I mentioned the pub quiz earlier, and we've rolled that into literally straight after that pub quiz, I sat down and I wrote a deck that night and I sent it out to a bunch of corporates that night, and we already had leads coming in by the next morning. The other thing, rolling out, like tomorrow night, we're rolling out the bingo nights and things like that. But just like we try and decide on that course of action and then make sure we execute it. And it's like exactly as you were saying, like it is like TV programming. If you do it, make sure you do it properly. But yeah, just constantly, but don't try and just hold off on things for like 2 or 3 weeks because it might improve or because it's a whole lot of work. Like you can get something set up real easy on, Squarespace or Shopify with a Stripe integration. You can get that set up in a day or two. There's no reason not to get on and move.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess this kind of brings on a bit to the Philippines and the situation that they're facing at the moment is that they've got total liquor bans, so they're not allowed to sell any alcohol. They've now got, I guess they've got longer term plans. So Joe, you're saying you had to, in Singapore, you just had to do it overnight, and same with John. Literally overnight, you've got to come up with new ideas, you've got to come up with new platforms. The Philippines now, because they've got their liquor ban, have they now got time to plan? Do they? Because one of our questions was from the Philippines. So what can they do now? What can they do when they can't get to their breweries to operate their breweries? They can't sell their beer. There's no market to sell their beer to because it's been closed down. What can they do? How can they still exist? How can they plan for the future? What are they going to be doing over the next 6 weeks, a month or 6 weeks, however long this ban lasts? I know, Ollie, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, so I've seen some tactically some interesting ideas. I've seen some brands different brands in different categories pre-selling products. So there were a couple of brands I saw in Malaysia that were pre-selling. They weren't breweries, obviously. I wish we could brew in Malaysia, but that's a longer story. They're pre-selling things. So what they're saying, well, we're not going to get this product in for a month, but if you would like to order like a subscription package, once we've got it 6 months in advance, we'll give you a 30% discount. Another thing that, potentially brands could do is, they can, if you've got, obviously if there's a complete lockdown on delivery, a complete lockdown on any kind of alcohol, then you've got to brand and do activities. Like you've got no other choice. You just got to keep people engaged. And again, the lessons you learned, the lessons that businesses learn over and over again in situations where there's restrictions on supply of products. So if you disappear, you're screwed. If you suddenly go disappear, everyone thinks you've collapsed, and then rumors start spreading that your brewery's shut down. So yeah, I would say like pre-selling products, even like moving into things like what Dave mentioned before, like can you pivot to supplying dog food? If you can do things like that, if you can switch your production lines to other products, if you can do that, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Charles, you're on mute.
Let's unmute me. In the UK at the moment, you've got Wagamama. So the restaurants are closed down. Wagamama is now doing cookery courses online. So
Cool.
you'd think in normal days, a restaurant doesn't want to tell people how to cook their food, because then they won't go to the restaurant. But now restaurants are going, okay, look, let's build that community. Let's do something. We can't get to people. So what can we do? How can we engage? And I think, your point about, sending positive messages out there, getting your name out there, doing things that may not be specifically what your core business is, but it's at least getting your name out there. I mean, John, you were talking about like China, mentioning what's going on in China and what's happening in Taiwan, because you're distributing in some of these markets. So I guess it's still getting your brand out there, isn't it? It's like positive messages and emotional messages coming out from your brand.
I think most importantly, like what Ollie said, is that you still want to be relevant. You still want to be in people's minds, even though we are going through this period of time, right? And like what is important is that everyone's pivoting, but everyone's pivoting into the same direction, right? So in the past, where we always talk about in reality in the past was everyone's fighting for tap space, shelf space, right? In the supermarket, in the retail, in the bars, right? And this is now happening in the virtual space, right? Because within a week, I don't know how many retailers and how many new craft beer online shops and breweries have done, go live on free delivery, house delivery right to your doorstep. So everyone's doing the same thing, and everyone's trying to fight for that share of voice, like what Ollie has mentioned. So I think it's important to also look, how do you stand out when there are so many voices right now? So everyone's doing it, right? So I think in the last 10 days, probably Joe would back me up on this, is that I think on the online space in Singapore, we probably haven't seen as many supply and choices of beer that's readily available to the consumers, right? So I think it's it's crazy, right? In a short time, right? And it's how do brands, stay relevant and tell your story, really tell your story, and how to stand out, because everyone's trying to sell beer. Everyone's saying that I'm going to deliver beer to your doorstep, running discounts, doing promos and all those things. So it's about finding your voice and getting people to engage. I think what Ollie said just now was originality, humor. Those are things that's a very high position in the presentation he mentioned just now. So I think that's really important. Building communities, staying engaged. Yeah.
And then also, when it comes to building communities, obviously, when you send beer out there, you want to know where it's going. You want to know who it's going to.
Yeah.
And without using the dirty word of tracking, and there's nobody likes to be tracked, but you want to know where that beer is going to. You want to know who's buying your beer. Is your beer going to new customers that may not have been customers previously? And Joe, we spoke about this for a short time the other day. Are there tracking methods that you can use? Because obviously, being a communications company, those are kind of things as well that come into your everyday business. Are there tracking techniques you can use to find out who is buying your beer, what the demographics are of people who are buying your beer, if they're new customers? How do you follow up with them? How do you reach back out to them? How do you understand what they want? Are there ways that you can do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wealth of different tools that you can use to do all those sort of things. And I mean, I think some of the most, like at the most basic level, like even just making sure setting out like Facebook pixels on your website, making sure you've got all the tracking tags on it so you can identify who's a first customer, where they're coming from, being able to break it down. And that's where we've been, like, we just started experimenting with ads, well, pretty much like a couple of days after we launched the store. And have been really impressed by what the ROI is. But, it's been really interesting to see that, because it's a good, like I said before, like a good 85% of them are people that have never engaged with our brand before. They've got no history of it. They're often like asking questions, and we're driving it all through Facebook Messenger as well. So, it's a little bit tiring because we do have autoresponders and things like that, but also like there's probably like a good 50 people a day messaging, asking questions through Facebook Messenger as well. So getting a chance to kind of actually engage with them. Not that it's all me. It's obviously a couple of other people as well. But the amount of tools that you can use to run across all that is pretty amazing. And that's where things like, you know, the pub quiz and all that. Yes, it's building community, it's building brand, it's all these cool things. But we're completely open with it. We don't give people shit if they're not drinking our beer or anything like that, because at the end of the day, they're engaging with our brand, they're clicking through the website, like they'll see our ads and all that sort of thing as well. So yeah, there are all those sort of things that come off the back of it as well. But we've definitely, one of the other things we've actually started doing as well is actively looking for, so I 100% agree with you on the ad spend, don't go dark in this period, because companies that do go dark, every downturn always come out worse off. And when I say go dark, that means cut off ad spend, marketing efforts and all that. One of the other things that we've been doing as well is proactively still reaching out to sports groups and other groups as well about sponsoring them during right now. Not that we've got like a whole lot of cash, but we tie it to rebates and things like that. And all of a sudden, so we've actually been still able to tap into broader sports groups and just give them a code that it doesn't give much of a discount at all, but what it does do is, in fact, it doesn't give them a discount at all. It gives them just like a $5 rebate for every case or $10 rebate for every case. And once you guys hit 500 cases over the next 3 months, then you'll get that paid back. And because no one else is out there spending or doing anything right now, but this isn't even an immediate hit. We get money in well before we've got to pay that out. So in terms of like looking at, you know, cash flow and everything like that as well, it just makes sense. And it also means that we've been reaching, like being able to amplify through those communities as well has had quite a different effect as well, which has been very different from, I mean, when we first started pivoting, I guess, was when COVID first came, and because we were in a lot of hotels, DFS, and all of that pretty much got wiped out pretty quickly. So our first pivot was very much focused on focusing on the cafes, you know, premium on trade, and looking at doing like drinking brunches and partnering with them on that. And we actually saw a week-on-week growth after the initial sort of crash. And we saw from that, we started, that's when we first started approaching different sports groups and not just sports groups, it's charity groups or whatever, and just offering them a rebate. They're all buying beer anyway. If you can make it a good cause in the process, then it's great as well.
Yeah.
And for us, that's something that we've very much noticed. Like even a month in, we were having internal conversations about how our audience is already quite different from what it was 2 months ago, and then already again today, I'd say it's significantly different from what it was 3 months ago.
And I mean, John, have you seen a change in audience?
Oh yeah, I mean, like Joe, we have almost never been on the B2C platform, or you know, we're overly overweight on B2B. So what this does is it's pretty interesting. Like one thing that I look at is geographically, even though Singapore is so small, right? It's interesting to see where the concentration of the orders come from, because in the past we are very much most of our business is done in the CBD area and off city fringe, but this gives us more data on where the consumers actually live, and it shows us where might be you know, like neglected areas geographically speaking that we have not been serving well, and this gives us you know, something to look into, serving this neglected space or areas better. Yeah. And also, like, you know, working with F&B, other F&B partners who might be in those areas to come up with initiatives or things that can complement each other's business.
And have you been able to track in any way where this is going, or is it effectively just kind of manual tracking that okay, we see a new order come in from where it's coming in? You know, do you know what these new consumers are looking for, or how to reach out to them better?
Yeah, so right now with the system that we have basically where they live and beer choices as well. I think that's very interesting, right? Beer choices, what people are really ordering, and we notice probably different age groups, what they like what beers they like to drink better, and I think that's something that's really interesting as well.
Yeah.
And then gives us better targeting marketing to different age group, different demographics. I think that's something that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So,
I think sorry.
no,
sorry,
carry on, Joe. Carry on.
Charles, I was going to say, I'm basically living on the analytics report from our website at the moment, tracking the spend and where it's going and all that. And where it's been interesting as well as when we do new initiatives, seeing, and then because it's automatically creating a link between different customers and like what their spend is. So seeing which customers, like, we've had some that have been ordering consistently every week or every 3 or 4 days, which ones are actually spending more, or if we do a new code, or like when we did the Adopter Pub, how many people that were existing customers decided not to use a discount code they might have had and instead used the one that gave money away, and things like that as well. And that sort of information for us has been really helpful to be able to make live decisions basically on how we should, we already know what we need to do to improve things a lot. Like for us, mixed cases have represented 68%, I think, of all our sales in the last 3 weeks. And we've only got 2 types of mixed cases, and you've got no choice on what you get. So, for us, but from a logistics point of view, we're like, well, it's really hard to because if you're doing we're trying to do same day delivery or within a few hours of delivery, and you're getting these orders coming in, it just created this logistics backlog. So that's what I was referring to earlier as well in terms of step changes, because if, we know now that we need to be offering more variety, more, packs of 6-packs and all that sort of stuff as well to be able to roll out, because every time we've got something even similar to it, it just flies out the door. But we've also got to make sure the back end can handle it as well.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple more questions. One from the Philippines, because obviously they have their alcohol ban on at the moment. What do you think about producing non-alcoholic beverages, and would that affect a brewery's branding? Ollie, do you want to have a crack at this one? So how would do you think it would be good for breweries to look at non-alcoholic beverages, and would that affect how people perceive the brewery?
I mean, I think you'd have to be a titanic dickhead if you look down upon a brewery if they produce a non-alcoholic product. I mean, you'd have to be such and if someone rejects your brand because you've decided to make non-alcoholic beverages in your brewery, you don't want them as a customer anyway, because they're probably radiating out some radiation toxicity, negativity. I mean, look at the United States right now, right? It's becoming, the whole hard seltzer, NA beer, it's like a huge wave. And obviously there's still a macho element, in the craft beer community. And I'm not saying here, but I mean, just globally, and it's not, breweries shouldn't be making, brewers shouldn't be making non-alcoholic products. I mean, it's idiotic. I mean, that's actually the greatest, I would say, if in the Philippines you can convert your brewery quickly, or you can at least make some kind of non-alcoholic beverage that's legal, and you're obviously following regulatory compliance. That's great. I mean, it's something that drives me crazy, actually. I've been wishing more craft beer companies in Southeast Asia and around APAC did this, because if you have a non-alcoholic alternative, and it's not just NA beer, right? I mean, you look at Malaysia, there's a brand called Tapping Tapia of premium sodas, and they've broken into all the premium cafes around Kuala Lumpur. They're swapping out brands, little hipster cafes are swapping out Coca-Cola. I know in Singapore, there are some brands as well that have broken into the non-alcohol. There are some non-alcoholic kind of beverage brands. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like if you can, as long as you can make the branding cool and make the drink taste good. To me, it's actually a gateway drug for drinkers who drink a non-alcoholic beverage to actually drink your beer. It's like a win-win if you can make it work. But the last thing I'll say is marketing non-alcoholic beverages is a total ball game. That is one of the challenges, is obviously working out how to market and sell them, because that is a different ball game.
But if you've got the logistics networks in place, that's kind of half of the battle won. You're already reaching out into certain communities. I guess that's you could tap into those logistics channels. It's then how do you provide that? How do you stimulate the demand for them?
But I mean, you got what Joe's talking about, right? And I mean, that's a perfect example where if you've got well-developed e-commerce front end, or you've got any kind of e-commerce or online delivering, if you can say, hey, you know, we'll chuck in a couple of glasses of our soda, our flavored soda, or of our lemonade, or ginger beer, or like some kind of non-alcoholic malt beverage. I mean, you can just give it out with your existing products. Or again, if your brewery is locked down in the Philippines, I mean, I don't know, that would be to me that's a great idea. I think it would be really smart. And I mean, again, I think a lot of drinkers as well. I mean, there's people like me, like I don't necessarily want to be on heavy IPAs the entire night. I mean, I'd love it if even if at a tap room, it would be so cool if they had a non-alcoholic alternative that they made in their brewery. I know, to me, it's actually. It's a good idea. More breweries should do it.
Yeah, it also, I guess, it'll get your, I say, it gets your name out there, and it's also something that typically you can turn that on almost overnight. You know, it doesn't take 3 weeks to produce non-alcoholic beverages. Yeah, so very quickly you could start spinning out a line of sodas that gets you onto the market. It just keeps if nothing else, it keeps your workforce paid. It keeps the brewery name out there, and it also gives you something else to market. It gives you something else to have your name out there on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, so people don't forget about you. So once this drinking ban stops, your name is still there. It's what yourself and Joe are both talking about, saying spend on advertising at the moment. This is a perfect reason to spend on advertising and promotions to make sure that you are at the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit more on the NA beer or whatever, right? I think it's, if you think about it, right, NA beer today tastes so much better than what it used to taste 10 years ago, where it's like terrible, no one would drink it, right? But there are very, very good NA beers that I've drank today. And I mean, it, is if you think about it, what happens if you brew it in the Philippines and it turns out to be your best selling product going forward, right? You never know, you might sell even better than the beers that you have been brewing all this while, right? So I think it's worth investing or investigating. Sorry, but I would say don't rush into it. If you're really doing it, spend some time and think about how you're going to do it and how you're going to execute it. It's kind of like stuck in traffic, right? If you're stuck in traffic, don't just react or take a left turn and see where it leads me. And you're just gonna stuck in traffic even more, right? But think about that journey and what's the best way to go where you want to go. But I think it's definitely something that's worth considering in the Philippines, because I mean, if you can't brew beer, best thing you could do is brew non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, because I think InBev is looking at it to become about 20% of its entire beer portfolio, entire beer sales in like 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So if you've got the world's largest brewer looking at non-alcoholic beer, then there has to be a market. And it's a phenomenal market as well. 20% of the global beer market. So well worth looking into. Yeah.
And you don't have a lot of competition right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that can bring us on. We got a question from John Pemberton over in Vietnam. It's basically what do you think the new normal will look like when the market does come back? How are things going to change? Are we going to go to a totally virtual market? Is it going to be split? Is it going to go back to exactly how it was? I mean, Joe, what's your view on this? What do you think the market's going to do when this crisis is over?
I think the channels the new channels of revenue that you're building now aren't going to just disappear overnight, even if it come back. So this is the way we're approaching it, is that these are going to be like building a culture and community around people that are regularly ordering home delivery of your product is going to be something that we would. I mean, obviously, I think it will drop significantly once people aren't forced to be in quarantine, stuck at home all the time. But I think it will be revenue streams that will maintain. I think we'll be looking at a very different business in the sense of being a little like right now. For the next 8 to 16 weeks, we're pretty much resigned ourselves to the fact that we're effectively e-commerce business, so starting to try and act a lot more like it as well, rather than our normal sort of channels just took a little bit to switch around. And I think as well, like once the bars do open up, like it's going to be, there's going to be social distancing for a while. It's going to be lower capacity. But there'll also be like supply chain disruptions around the world. There'll be freight issues and all that. So there's, you know, like, I think there's, like, as we've kind of covered before, like for smaller breweries, there's a lot of opportunity to build the brand now, but also to power out on the back end as well. And I think that in terms of the impact for smaller independent breweries as well, I think there's a lot of opportunity to be had in the next year and a half or so, but it's going to be pretty heavy getting there. But in terms of how it's going to affect drinking culture and going out, I mean, people, depends how long it goes on for, right? The more people are just stuck at home drinking and doing things, engaging like this, what is the new normal afterwards?
Yeah. John, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? How do you think the new marketplace is going to look after all this?
I think I look at the positives, right? So I think that after this whole thing, people's life will change a little bit in terms of how they approach e-commerce and drinking at home, buying beers and groceries from home. I think Singapore being such a small country, makes it really convenient to just go to the brick and mortar store to pick up beers, pick up groceries, and that's why e-commerce hasn't really picked up as much. But I think this really forces the issue, and I think that consumers will find out how much more convenient and easy it is just to go online with your mobile phone and just buy a bunch of beers and get somebody delivered to you. Also, in terms of behavior-wise, most guys drink outdoors, right? Most guys are drinking in bars, and at least among the local Singaporeans, the consumption of beer at home isn't really high. So I think what this does would affect, like create new habits in people's life going forward. So I think that e-commerce is here to stay, and when things recover, your regular income stream will slowly come back, right? So in a sense that there's the saying, right? If you've already hit bottom, you can't go any lower, right? So I think it's important to plan the business in the worst case scenario, right? So like how we do it is also like what's the new normal? It's very hard to predict, but we have a bear case, a base case, and a bull case, and then we are at least with certain plans in place, and with certain things that could trigger it. Then we know what action plans we're going to undertake, and probably not find ourselves in a situation where we're caught surprised, going forward.
Yeah. Okay, Ollie, we'll wrap up this panel session in a minute. I'll just pose that same question to you, Ollie. What do you think? What do you think the market's going to look like? And we've had one more question as well come in from Dan in Korea about how do you build up consumer confidence again to go out, because they're starting to come out of a relative lockdown in Korea. They're starting to open up that market. I say, what will that market look like? And then how do we get people? How do we build up confidence? I guess for us, what's more relevant is how do we build up confidence in trying the products that are being offered by craft brewers, going out trying new beers.
Yeah, so I listened to a really good podcast. There's a beer publishing company out of the United States called Good Beer Hunting. It's quite good, and there was an interview. One of their UK correspondent was interviewing a brewery. I was listening to the podcast yesterday, and they were talking how right now they're kind of going through this weird, like they're trying to do their planning of like formats, right? Are they going to be in pubs? Where are they going to distribute? And they're trying to do that to forward plan, right? Their production planning. And it was really interesting. They had a disagreement on the interview. The brewer said, I think this is going to lead to a long-term shift toward like what John was talking about. It's going to force all the people who've been wanting to go out. Is actually going to be a long-term pivot in terms of consumer behavior to drinking at home. And then the interviewer who was the beer journalist, he said, no, there's going to be this big boom in pubs. I don't know. My theory, again, like my point of view is I reckon it's going to be, roller coasters of up and down. And I think the new normal is going to be, I guarantee you, just from looking at even the numbers in China, China might not be back to normal yet. We don't even know. I mean, I hope it is, but if China's not, I think that's China is the canary in the gold mine right now. And part of the problem is obviously they're not necessarily releasing all the information. For instance, China wasn't even tracking asymptomatic COVID cases until very recently. So we don't even know the number of people really who are infected with COVID in China. It's not the numbers. And they're open about that. They're saying that even the government saying that it was just capturing symptomatic cases. So what I think will happen is I think we're going to go through these waves of, I think, government pressure. There's going to be pressure on governments from big business, from F&B, and many people in the F&B industry to force them to open up, similar to what we're seeing in Vietnam. I suspect things will maybe be open for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Cases will spread, and then they'll start locking down again. And I think if that happens 3-4 times in a row, I think that will honestly be a pretty bad death knell for maybe the next 6 months to a year for a lot of public social activities. And I think that's honestly, to me, that's one of the better. That's probably the middle road. I mean, so yeah, look, I think the new normal is honestly, I think no matter what, we're all going to be dragged kicking and screaming into what Joe's talking about, which is e-commerce. I think even if bars reopen, do you guys seriously think a lot of people are going to be going out and happily drinking? I reckon even for all the people who are gung-ho about going out pubbing and clubbing, I reckon you've got a lot of other people who are probably, maybe their families are not even going to let them leave the house. So I suspect there's probably going to be also some kind of social cuts between, in the old days, it was about rich and poor, different social class, gender. I think there's now going to be kind of like a cut, there's going to be kind of like a split between people who really want to go out versus like a group of people who are going to be wanting to stay home. And I can't see any other way. I mean, really, looking how things have been in the past 4 months, what I'd end on is, we can't keep on planning for like 1 week ahead. Oh, the Singapore government, it's 300 cases today. Oh, it's 400 cases tomorrow. Oh, that's okay. Then it's 300 cases. Oh, that's good. I mean, I think we've really got to start thinking about, well, you've got to assume that this is going to go on for maybe a year. And I think that'll make it easier for everyone, right? If we say, hey, it's probably going to be up and down for a year. And that's probably going to be to answer John's question, that's going to be the new normal. We're going to ricochet up and down between different layers of opening and closing. And, I think people like Joe and John who are, have built e-commerce and are planning ahead. You've got to start programming for knowing that people are going to be stuck at home potentially for months. You're on mute, Charles.
So severe disruption followed by time of uncertainty, followed by a relative return to normal. Is what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a roller coaster. It's like, I think Dan mentioned that, right? It's going to be up and down. And I think, if it's up and down, it's better that you plan for as John said, you kind of plan for the more challenging scenario. And look, it's not that difficult. I mean, Joe was saying they managed a couple of weeks to get an e-commerce setup going. I mean, if anyone on this call is worried about getting more active in digital, it just takes time. As Joe said, Joe was saying, if you can set up an e-commerce system in a couple of weeks, you build it piece by piece, you get more and more active. I mean, if you can get that going and, once lockdowns are, as long as you can deliver beer, I think you can build a sustainable e-commerce business. I mean, if anything, look at what happened in China with SARS, with SARS, where after that helped launch Alibaba. It didn't launch Alibaba, but it helped really supercharge Alibaba and a lot of the e-commerce delivery systems. I suspect it'll be the same here, where e-commerce will be the new normal for craft beer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to bring the session to an end now. Thank you very much to our presenter Oliver, and also to our panelists John and Joe. I hope this has been a useful session for you. I hope it's answered some of your questions. I'm sure it's posed up quite a few more questions than it's answered as well about what's going to be happening. How can people's businesses weather through this storm, and how they can come out stronger on the other side. So what I'm going to do now, if you bear with me for a couple of minutes, we're going to open up a meeting room, which anybody who wants can come across to the meeting room. Yeah, we'll still be chatting in there. Bring a beer. Come and relax, and we'll have a chat. I'm going to share the address for the meeting room in the chat room now. So in the chat box on the side of your screen, I'm just going to share the meeting address there. Can you see that? Is that 1 minute? Is that just, if somebody can just tell me that that's come up okay? Okay, great. So if you just give me a minute or 2 minutes, I will go into that and open up that meeting, and then just copy the address and come across and join us for a beer and a bit more of a chat. So thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you for everybody for tuning in. It was a great session, and we look forward to hosting more of these over the months to come. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.